I thought the worst thing about my daughter's graduation would be sitting 3 seats away from my ex-husband. I was wrong. The worst thing was ignoring his desperate warning about what my current boyfriend had hidden in my car. The auditorium buzzed with the excited chatter of proud families, camera flashes capturing milestone moments, and the rustle of graduation programs. I was focused on Emma, my beautiful 18-year-old daughter, sitting in the third row with her cap slightly askew, just like she'd worn her baseball cap as a kid. This was supposed to be one of the happiest days of my life. Then David, my ex-husband, leaned across the empty seat between us and pressed a folded piece of paper into my palm. His eyes were wild, desperate, and when he whispered, "Check your car. Now." His voice cracked with an urgency I hadn't heard since the night he'd called to tell me his father was dying. I should have listened. Instead, I rolled my eyes and shoved the note into my purse, assuming it was just another one of his paranoid episodes about my boyfriend Marcus. That morning had started like a dream. Marcus had surprised me with coffee in bed and a beautiful bouquet of white roses, Emma's favorite flower. "For the proud mama," he'd said, kissing my forehead in that gentle way that still made my heart flutter after 8 months together. He'd been nothing but supportive about Emma's graduation, even offering to skip the ceremony to avoid any awkwardness with David. "Are you sure you don't want to come?" I'd asked, adjusting his tie as he got ready for work. Marcus owned a small but successful landscaping business, and spring was his busiest season. "This is your moment with Emma," he'd replied, squeezing my hands. "Besides, someone needs to make sure dinner reservations are perfect for tonight. I want everything to be special for you too." The thoughtfulness still warmed me as I sat in that auditorium chair, straightening my navy dress and checking my phone for photos Marcus had asked me to send. Emma had been nervous about her father and me being in the same space. Our divorce 3 years ago hadn't been pleasant. David's drinking problem and financial irresponsibility had slowly poisoned what was once a loving marriage. But we'd both promised Emma we'd behave. And honestly, David looked better than he had in years. Clean-shaven, clear-eyed, wearing the navy suit I'd bought him for our 10th anniversary. "Mom, just promise me no drama today," Emma had pleaded over breakfast. "This is about my future, not your past." I'd promised. And I'd meant it. But as David's note burned a hole in my purse and his anxious glances continued throughout the ceremony, I felt the familiar knot of unease that had plagued the final months of our marriage. Something was wrong. Something was always wrong when David got that look. If only I'd known that this time, his paranoia might actually be justified. The ceremony ended with thunderous applause and the traditional cap toss. Emma's cap landed somewhere in the second row, and she laughed as she bent to retrieve it, her smile so bright it could have powered the whole auditorium. This was it, the moment I'd been dreaming of since she started kindergarten. "Mom!" Emma rushed over, graduation gown flowing behind her like wings. "Can you believe it? I actually did it." She threw her arms around me, and for a moment everything else faded away. This was my baby girl, my greatest achievement, ready to conquer the world. David approached us with his camera, and despite everything, I felt a pang of nostalgia. We'd been good together once. Good parents, good partners. "Congratulations, sweetheart," he said to Emma, his voice thick with emotion. "Your mom and I are so proud of you." As families began to disperse and Emma went to find her friends for photos, David stepped closer. "Did you read the note?" His voice was urgent, almost pleading. "David, not today, please." I turned away, scanning the crowd for Emma's red hair. "Whatever issue you have with Marcus can wait." "This isn't about jealousy, Sarah. I followed him this morning." His words hit me like ice water. "After you left for the ceremony, he went to your car. He put something in your trunk." I whirled around to face him, anger flashing hot in my chest. "You followed him?" Are you kidding me? David, this is exactly the kind of behavior that... Sarah, listen to me. He grabbed my arm, his grip firm but not painful. I know how this sounds. I know what you think of me. But I was driving by your house to drop off Emma's graduation gift early, and I saw him. He was looking around like he didn't want to be seen, and he was carrying a black duffel bag. The world seemed to tilt slightly. Marcus had told me he was going straight to work after I left. Why would he go back to my house? And what was in the bag? You're being paranoid, I said, but my voice lacked conviction. Marcus wouldn't... Then prove me wrong, David interrupted. Check your car. Right now. If I'm wrong, I'll leave you alone forever. But if I'm right... He trailed off, and the fear in his eyes made my stomach drop. Standing there in the emptying auditorium, surrounded by the debris of celebration, I had to make a choice. Trust the man I'd divorced for his lies and paranoia, or trust the man I'd been sharing my bed with for 8 months. To understand why David's warning hit me so hard, you need to know our history. We met in college, married young, and spent 15 years building what I thought was a solid life together. David was charming, funny, and devoted to Emma from the moment she was born. But somewhere along the way, the charm became manipulation, the humor became sarcasm, and the devotion became obsession. It started small. David would question my friendships, especially with male colleagues. He'd show up unexpectedly at my workplace to surprise me, but really to see who I was talking to. When I got promoted to marketing director, instead of celebrating, he accused me of sleeping with my boss. The drinking started around then, just a few beers after work, then a few more, then whiskey before dinner. The final straw came when I found out he'd been secretly checking my phone and following me. Not just casual suspicion, full-blown surveillance. He'd installed tracking apps, gone through my email, even hired a private investigator for 2 weeks to make sure I wasn't cheating. When I confronted him, he broke down crying, swearing he'd stop, begging for another chance. I can't lose you, Sarah. You and Emma are everything to me. The thought of you with someone else makes me crazy. But crazy was exactly what he'd become. The paranoia consumed him, and by extension, it consumed our marriage. Emma, 16 at the time, started spending more time at friends' houses. Dad's being weird again, she'd whisper when she called asking to stay overnight elsewhere. The divorce was messy. David fought me on everything. Custody, alimony, even who got to keep our wedding china. He couldn't accept that his behavior had driven me away. In his mind, there had to be someone else, some other reason. He spent thousands of dollars on lawyers trying to prove I was having an affair, even though I'd been completely faithful throughout our marriage. Meeting Marcus had been like stepping into sunlight after years in a dark room. He was steady, respectful, and secure in himself. When I told him about David's possessiveness, Marcus listened without judgment. Some people don't know how to love without owning, he'd said. I'm not like that. And he'd proven it, giving me space, never demanding access to my phone or asking where I'd been. But now, standing in that auditorium with David's desperate warning echoing in my ears, I realized something chilling. What if David's paranoia had been projection? What if he'd been so convinced I was hiding things because he was hiding things? And what if Marcus, who seemed so different from David, was actually playing a much longer, more sophisticated game? The thought made me sick, but it also made me reach into my purse and unfold David's note with trembling fingers. David's note was brief but terrifying. Black duffel bag. Trunk of your car. He thought I was gone, but I saw everything. This isn't about us. This is about Emma's safety. Please trust me one more time. Emma's safety. My hands started shaking. Whatever this was about, David believed our daughter was in danger. Despite everything between us, David had never lied about anything involving Emma's welfare. He'd been an unreliable husband, but he'd always been a protective father. "I need to go to my car," I told David, trying to keep my voice steady. "But if this is some scheme to break up Marcus and me..." "It's not." His voice was flat, resigned. "Sarah, I know what you think of me. I know I destroyed your trust. But I swear on Emma's life, this isn't about getting you back. This is about keeping you both safe." We walked to the parking lot in tense silence. My blue Honda Civic sat in the third row, looking completely normal under the afternoon sun. David hung back while I approached, fishing my keys from my purse with sweaty fingers. The trunk opened with a soft click, revealing my usual collection of reusable shopping bags, Emma's old volleyball equipment, and jumper cables. Nothing suspicious. I almost laughed with relief and turned to tell David he was being ridiculous again. Then I saw it. Tucked behind the spare tire, partially hidden by a beach towel, was a black canvas duffel bag I'd never seen before. My heart started pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. "David." My voice came out as a whisper. He approached slowly, his face grim. "Don't touch it," he said. "Let me." With careful movements, he unzipped the bag partway, then immediately stepped back, his face pale. "Jesus Christ, Sarah." I looked over his shoulder and immediately wished I hadn't. Inside the bag were clear plastic bags filled with white powder. A lot of white powder. More than I'd ever seen outside of movies. Enough to destroy lives. Enough to send someone to prison for decades. Oh my God. I stumbled backward, my legs suddenly weak. "Oh my God, David. What is this? Why is this in my car?" "I think Marcus is using you," David said quietly. "Your car, your clean record, your access to Emma's school and activities. You're the perfect cover." The implications hit me like a freight train. If this was found in my car, I'd be arrested. Emma would watch her mother get handcuffed at her graduation celebration. My career, my reputation, my future, everything would be destroyed. And Emma would blame herself somehow, the way kids always do. "We have to call the police," I said, but David shook his head. "And tell them what? That you just discovered drugs in your own car? Sarah, you live with this guy. You have access to his business, his contacts. From their perspective, you could be involved." He was right, and that terrified me more than anything. Marcus had been so careful, so patient. He'd gained my trust completely, moved in gradually, become part of Emma's life. He'd attended her soccer games, helped her with college applications, even co-signed for her car loan when David's credit couldn't handle it. "What do I do?" I asked, hating how small my voice sounded. David closed the trunk carefully. "First, we get Emma somewhere safe. Then we figure out how to prove Marcus did this without destroying your life in the process." As if summoned by our conversation, my phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "How did the ceremony go? Can't wait to celebrate with my girls tonight. Love you." Looking at those words that had once made me feel cherished and secure, I felt nothing but cold, sick dread. How long had he been planning this? How many times had he looked at me and seen not a woman he loved, but a useful pawn in whatever game he was playing? David and I agreed that I would go home and act normal while he took Emma out for a celebratory dinner, keeping her away from whatever was about to unfold. My hands shook as I drove home, practicing what I would say to Marcus, how I would play innocent while trying to gauge his reaction. Marcus was in the kitchen when I walked in, humming while he prepared what looked like an elaborate dinner. Candles on the table, wine breathing on the counter, the whole romantic setup. The normalcy of it made everything more surreal. "There's my graduate's mom." He pulled me into his arms, kissing my forehead. "How was the ceremony?" "I've been thinking about you all day." I forced a smile, studying his face for any sign of deception. It was beautiful. Emma looked so happy. I hesitated, then decided to test the waters. David was there, of course. Something flickered across Marcus's expression, so briefly I almost missed it. Oh? How did that go? I know you were worried about awkwardness. He was different, calmer than usual. He actually said some nice things about Emma's future. I watched carefully. He mentioned seeing you this morning, actually. Said you stopped by the house after I left? Marcus went very still. His hands, which had been casual on my waist, tightened slightly. David said that? Yeah. He seemed confused about why you'd come back. I told him you probably forgot something for work. I kept my voice light, conversational. Did you? For a long moment, Marcus didn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice had a quality I'd never heard before. Cold, calculating. Sarah, your ex-husband is a paranoid alcoholic who's been trying to break us up since day one. You know that, right? I know, but he seemed genuinely concerned about something. He even gave me a note. I pulled the crumpled paper from my purse. Something about checking my car. The change in Marcus was immediate and terrifying. His whole body tensed, his face hardening into a mask I'd never seen before. This wasn't the gentle, supportive man who'd brought me coffee in bed. This was a stranger. Did you? His voice was quiet, dangerous. Check your car? I had two choices. Lie and see how far this would go, or confront him directly. Something in his expression made the decision for me. Yes, I did. Marcus stepped back, running his hands through his hair. For a moment, he looked almost relieved. And what did you find? You know what I found. My voice was steadier than I felt. The question is why? Why would you do this to me? To Emma? He laughed, but there was no humor in it. Do you have any idea how perfect you are, Sarah? Single mom, clean record, respectable job. You have access to the school district, parent networks, community events. Do you know how valuable that is? The casualness of his admission hit me like a slap. How long? I whispered. How long have you been planning this? Since before we met? His smile was cold, predatory. I saw you at Emma's school fundraiser last year. Perfect target. Lonely, recently divorced, eager for someone to treat you well. It was almost too easy. 8 months. 8 months of lies, of manipulation, of fake tenderness. 8 months of believing someone cared about me while he was really just setting me up to take the fall for his crimes. The landscaping business? I asked, though I already knew the answer. A perfect front. Cash business, lots of travel to different neighborhoods, access to wealthy clients' properties. He shrugged. The drugs were just more profitable than mulch. And when they found the drugs in my car, what was supposed to happen to me? To Emma? Marcus's expression didn't change. Collateral damage. I would have been long gone by then, and you would have been the perfect scapegoat. Single mom desperate for money, with access to school networks for distribution. The story would have written itself. What happened next felt like watching myself in a movie. I heard my own voice, surprisingly calm, telling Marcus that I needed some air. I walked to my car, got the duffel bag from the trunk, and carried it back into the house. Marcus watched me with interest, like I was a puzzle he was trying to solve. What are you doing, Sarah? Calling the police. I pulled out my phone. I'm going to tell them that I discovered drugs in my car and that my boyfriend just confessed to planting them there. Marcus moved fast, grabbing for my phone, but I was ready for him. Don't. My voice was ice. David is right outside. He heard everything through the kitchen window. If you touch me, if you try to leave, he's calling 911. It was a bluff. David was at dinner with Emma, but Marcus didn't know that. He froze, his face cycling through emotions I couldn't read. "You don't understand," he said, his voice taking on a pleading tone that I now recognized as another manipulation. "Sarah, I never meant for you to get hurt. The plan was to move the merchandise before anyone found it. You were never supposed to be in danger. But I was always expendable. It wasn't a question. If something went wrong, if you needed a scapegoat, you'd already set me up perfectly." He didn't deny it. Instead, he sat down heavily in one of my kitchen chairs, suddenly looking older and smaller. "What do you want, Sarah? Money? I can make this worth your while." The audacity of it, trying to bribe me after destroying 8 months of my life, would have been laughable if it weren't so sickening. "I want you out of my house. I want you to pack your things and leave, and I never want to see you again." "And then what?" "You still have to explain the drugs." "Then I tell the truth. All of it. Your confession, the timeline, everything. I'll take my chances with the police rather than live with a lie." Marcus stood up slowly, and for a moment I thought he might try to argue or threaten me. Instead, he nodded. "You're stronger than I gave you credit for. That's actually impressive." 20 minutes later, he was gone. Just like that. 8 months of my life, of Emma's life, packed into 2 suitcases and loaded into a truck I now realized was probably stolen. The man I'd thought I loved had never existed at all. I called David first. "It's over," I said when he answered. "Can you bring Emma home? We need to talk about everything." Then I called the police. The conversation was surreal, explaining how I'd discovered drugs in my own car, how my boyfriend had confessed to planting them, how my ex-husband's paranoid behavior had actually saved me from a federal prison sentence. As I waited for the officers to arrive, I sat in my kitchen surrounded by the remnants of Marcus's romantic dinner setup and realized something profound. Sometimes the people we think are protecting us are actually destroying us, and sometimes the people we think are destroying us are actually trying to save us. It's been 6 months since Emma's graduation day, and I'm still processing everything that happened. The police investigation concluded that Marcus, whose real name turned out to be Michael Thompson, was part of a larger drug trafficking operation that used legitimate relationships with single mothers to create safe houses and transportation networks. I testified at his trial. Looking at him across that courtroom, I couldn't find any trace of the man who'd brought me coffee in bed and called me beautiful. He'd been a performance, a carefully crafted character designed to exploit my vulnerabilities. The real person underneath was cold, calculating, and utterly indifferent to the lives he destroyed. But the hardest part wasn't dealing with Marcus's betrayal. It was confronting my own judgment. How had I been so wrong about someone I'd shared my bed with, my home with, my daughter with? How had I missed the signs that now seemed so obvious in hindsight? The answer, I've learned, is that predators like Marcus are professionals. They study their targets, identify their needs and insecurities, and become exactly what that person is looking for. I wasn't stupid or naive. I was human, with human needs for companionship and love. Marcus exploited those needs with surgical precision. David and I have found an unexpected peace in all this chaos. We're not getting back together. Too much has happened for that. But we've learned to appreciate each other's strengths. His paranoia, which once suffocated our marriage, literally saved Emma and me from disaster. My stability, which he'd once taken for granted, is something he now deeply respects. Emma handled everything with a maturity that both broke my heart and made me proud. "Mom," she said after I'd explained everything, "you didn't know because he didn't want you to know. That's not your fault. That's his crime." Sometimes the people who love us most are the ones who see our blind spots most clearly, even when we don't want them to. I'm single now, and likely will be for a long time. I need to rebuild my ability to trust, both others and myself. I need to understand how my desire to be loved made me vulnerable to manipulation. I need to forgive David for his past behavior while also acknowledging that his current instincts about Marcus were absolutely right. Most importantly, I need to teach Emma that love shouldn't require you to ignore your instincts or the warnings of people who care about you. Real love makes you more yourself, not less. It doesn't isolate you or ask you to dismiss the concerns of family and friends. So here's my question for you. If your ex-spouse, someone whose judgment you'd learned not to trust, warned you about your current partner, would you listen? When someone's past paranoia turned out to be present-day protection, how do you reconcile that? Did I handle the confrontation with Marcus correctly, or should I have involved the police from the moment I found the drugs? Was I naive to believe I could control the situation, or brave to face him directly? Sometimes the people we've written off as paranoid or controlling are actually the ones trying to save us from dangers we can't see. Sometimes our worst enemies become our unexpected allies. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever been in a situation where someone you didn't trust turned out to be right about something important? How do you balance forgiveness with wisdom, trust with protection? Share your story in the comments. I have a feeling I'm not the only one who's learned that love and manipulation can look disturbingly similar from the inside.